John Brown was born on May 9, 1800 in Torrington, Connecticut. He was the fourth of 8 children fathered by Owen Brown. When John Brown was 12, he witnessed the beating of a young African-American slave. This image haunted Brown's memories for his whole life. This is one of the main reasons that Brown did not agree with slavery. At the age of 16, Brown was sent to become a Congregationalist minister. That fell short when he ran out of money. John returned home and worked at his father's tannery until they had a falling out. He then opened his own tannery on the outskirts of town. Brown was a tanner for most of his life, in places like Ohio and Pennsylvania. At times, Brown employed up to 15 men. Later in his life, Brown discovered abolitionism. Brown stood up in church, stating, "Here before God, in the presence of these witnesses, from this time I consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery." Brown then went on to support the abolitionist cause, because he was disgusted by the violence of the pro-slavery groups. Brown was outraged by a series of attacks on settlers who were against slavery in his community, so Brown took matters into his own hands with a few of his sons. Brown and his sons retaliated against the attacks on the settlers by going to the homes of pro-slavery farmers and murdering them. This occurrence became known as Bloody Potawatomi. After this occurrence, it was clear that nothing was going to change in slavery without violence. Brown's next stop was to raid Harper's Ferry in order to spark a slave rebellion and establish a free state. Brown met with famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass, informing Douglass of his plans. Douglass ultimately refused to accompany Brown because Douglass said it was a doomed plan that would end in disaster. Brown attacked Harper's Ferry accompanied by 21 men, and 5 men were killed. Under the command of Robert E. Lee, Lieutenant Israel Green infiltrated John Brown's fort and put an end to the raid. After a gripping trial held in Charlestown, Brown was found guilty and hanged on December 2, 1859. John Brown's life and death were very controversial and are still debated to this day. During the time period of his death, the opinion of Brown was very apparent and in some places very different. One article from the New York Herald showed a passage titled 100 Guns in Honor of the Execution of John Brown. And the passage goes on to state, "Today, between 12 and 1 o'clock, 100 guns were fired, commemorative of the execution of John Brown." The article continues, "A few more reckless abolitionists exulted that Brown was made a martyr in their cause, and uttered threats that thousands would rise up in his stead, and also offer their lives a sacrifice when the proper time arrives." This shows one of the viewpoints of Brown during the years close to his death, a view fueled by hate and anger. Another view of Brown in the years surrounding his death was that of heroism and hope. An article from the New York Herald entitled "A Feeling in Boston" commemorates Brown. They say that he is a martyr of freedom, and that many of the prominent abolitionists were there to honor him and his bravery. This is one of the other prominent views on John Brown close to his death. Brown was seen as a man who was willing to give his life for something he believed in. Thinking back, there was a shift in the public view of John Brown. In an article from the Hartford Daily Current entitled "A Change at Harper's Ferry," J.T. Tobridge gives the reader a first-hand account on Harper's Ferry. He explains that the very place where all the bloodshed first erupted, there was a change at heart by saying such a sacrifice of himself set many to thinking on the subject who never thought before, many who had acknowledged in their hearts that slavery was wrong and that John Brown was right. The very spot that John Brown thought to be full of pro-slavery, hatred, and violence. And after just 10 short years, they were able to look back on slavery and see that John Brown's sacrifices were for a worthy cause and that they should have joined him instead of resenting him and sentencing him to death.